Hello and welcome to another episode of Getting Started.Life on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And today's show is brought to you by Keystone Mediation and Red Leg Funding. We have a great show today. Our guest, Joseph Markovich, is a IT specialist and owner of an IT business. And we're talking today about being safe on the internet. And it's funny, we were scrambling a little bit. We had a little bit of guest issue, and Marya and I were talking, and like a beam of light, I was reading an article about increased cyber attack dangers right now, a whole lot of crazy stuff with the internet maybe getting more dangerous as it's a very easy way for not only criminals but enemies to attack us. So I'm like, who can we have on? And Joe stepping up, thank you so much. And let's talk a little bit first about your background, but I want you to talk a little bit after that about the threat. So talk a little bit about your background and how you got into the internet.
So I got exposed to this new thing called the computer when I was 5 from my dad and my grandma. And then, jump ahead. And I had a part-time job after school in high school at the public library next to our high school. And I was teaching people, besides shelving books, I was teaching people how to use this new thing called the internet. So obviously, since the existence of time, there have been scams and there have been, people that want to get your information, people want to scam you, people want to get money off you. So like over the years of my experience, it's essentially just like kind of retooling for the next threat or the next group of threats and everything. So because everything is so internet focused now, you have to be incredibly careful of just what you do, because like the one wrong click or the one wrong response to an email or the one wrong like file attachment that you're not looking at close enough just can start to essentially spread doom to both you and then also like the people you're connected with too.
And doom is one of those words that never has like dual meaning of anything other than really, really crappy. So I like that.
Yeah.
Now, again, I work with you on some stuff, so I know how much you know, and I'm really looking forward to the steps. But talk a little bit about, I kind of had been thinking as this Ukraine thing was kicking off that Russian hackers are a big thing already, and now we're reading a lot of stuff about an increased potential risk. So is there a higher risk right now than there's been in the past?
Yes. Well, and so what's going on in Russia and Ukraine is like, it's one part of like a bigger piece of a lot of people. Like the scams and the risk to everything isn't going to stop. It could be tomorrow, could be the next big thing, and the risks aren't going to stop, because as long as there's money to be made, and as long as there's no other way, as long as there's money to be made, there is going to be scams, and there's going to be people trying to get your information, and it's not going to stop. It's not. And from my 20 plus years of experience, even when the internet was this new thing, people saw that, hey, I can use this for a bad purpose too. There's huge potential in using this for, not above board purposes. And so this will continue and continue. And as long as people fall for the scams, and as long as people don't do some, really basic due diligence, this will continue and continue and continue and continue. It will just continue forever.
Well, and I actually hope, like right now, my elderly dad lives with us, and like the degradation in his ability to discern like good and bad things on the internet. Like, so I mean, this can even help people who are helping with an aging parent, or especially parents too, right? Like, at this point, I just try and keep up with what my kids, with everything out there on the internet, because again, the scammers are one step ahead of that of what anybody's doing. So staying a step ahead of that to be able to tell them, don't do this or don't do that. Because if they do something wrong, in some degree, your household's like a bigger network for business, right? Like if they do something stupid and somehow something gets bad on your own system, you may not even know something's on there, and it's doing like keystroke recording and stuff like that.
Well, and the other thing too is that our lives are so busy just in general that there's, the best way to say it is our defenses are down, because it's more like, okay, what is this? Okay, let's open it, read it. Oh, I have to do something with this. I have to forward it to someone. I'm going to click on this without thinking, because our lives are so busy. So we're also not 100% putting like thought into it. It's more of like, I need to be able to like get this off my plate. And I might open something or click something or go somewhere that's like, I shouldn't have done that, but you're not thinking. You're like a robot, just like, okay, get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done.
Right.
And so that's also turned into like a thing, is that we're not being mindful of what we should and shouldn't be doing. And the other thing too is we're getting bombarded by so much information all the time.
Yeah.
That it becomes like either like, okay, I'm going to switch my brain off, or I'm done. And the ease of sending something electronically as opposed to a phone call or a letter, or things like our old school way of doing things. The ease is so nice, and the convenience is so nice, that like we've kind of put other things out of our brain, that it's like, well, okay, I'm just going to accept it, or oh no, I'll just do it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
totally.
that, yeah.
Totally.
So there's a lot of factors working against us, and our brains are only going to do so much before they decide like, that's I'm not going to think about this. So that.
Well, I was going to say, and one thing I'm amazed at in my business, you see fraud attempts all the time, or scam attempts, because they're able to discern when a deal is going on, right? Because somehow they're picking up email traffic.
Yep.
And as a result, they're not only preying on a stressful time for everybody involved, but they make this stuff look pretty real. I mean, people, I'm sure, would be listening to this or watching this and saying, oh, how could someone fall for that? And when I was doing my own deal last year, I was getting pretty convincing emails. Like there was enough, I know enough about this that I was able to go, okay, this is total bullshit. But it looked like it was from a title company. They had actually found the name of the guy who was a closer at the title company.
Yep.
And they created an email that looked like it. And I didn't get scammed on it, but I can tell you, I've heard it wasn't this. I heard about a person and a person. It was like, I know of deals that people worked on where the client didn't listen to some basic stuff and lost $90,000, $100,000, $150,000. So I think what you're talking about with convenience is right. Like people get lulled into this. It's that social engineering thing where people do certain things based on what they sort of think is right. And then boom, and you can't get that money back at that point. Like one of Putin's buddies is using it for something.
Or someone just got a nice windfall.
Yep.
So here's my naive thought process when I think I'm pretty good at seeing the scam stuff, but I also, in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, like, why would anybody want to hack me? I don't have like clearance anywhere. I don't have like $1 million in my bank account. Like, I figure there's bigger fish to go after than me. Am I just completely off base on that?
I will tell you why. Because all those little transactions fly under the radar of anything. That's the bank's allowance for write-offs. It's, you can't file an insurance claim if you lost $1,000 if your policy doesn't support it, because you'll spend more in paying the deductible than in your loss. So it's all these little amounts. So you hear about all the big things on the TV and the newspaper, all over social media. But the thing you're never hearing about are the small things. Like, oh, this company got $1,200 ripped off because they were too lazy to walk to their HR manager and give them new bank account information. They emailed it to them, and the email got intercepted. And then they fabricated an email. This is a real story, by the way, too. The two-factor authentication wasn't turned on their email. So somebody had replied to a fake email that looked like it came from Microsoft. They wanted their credentials. They gave him their credentials. They logged into their email account, set up a rule that was anything that was payroll-ish related in the subject got forwarded automatically to a random Gmail account. They emailed on behalf of the employee that said, here is my new bank account information. It was a bank in New Jersey. And then when payday came, then the HR manager also was at fault, because then he replied back, that email got intercepted and went to the random Gmail account, didn't even hit the user's inbox. And then when payday came, I get a panic call at like midnight that says I didn't get paid. And the money had been deposited into a random bank account in New Jersey. You'll never hear about that. Right. And you'll never hear the small stories. So it's all these little wins that keep it going and keep it going and keep it going, because you know it adds up. $50 here, $100 here, $1,000 there. It all adds up.
So we're going to run out of time if I don't start right into the steps. So I think we've got everybody sufficiently frightened and thinking, okay, what do I got to do? What's the first step? I know nothing about being safe on the internet. What should I do?
Step one is really the ultimate well, there's more than 5 steps, I'll tell you, but the first one is just being aware. If anything looks suspect, it is. And even if you know it's coming from, oh, this is my best friend Jim, and he always sends me jokes every Monday, and he sends me some information that if it looks fishy, it's fishy. Delete it, because what'll happen is the other person will attempt to get a hold of you in other means. So be aware.
And it's funny that you say that, because one of the key things, right? Everybody probably at their job has gone through some basic. Now I think it's probably required at most companies, and they'll show you in the email, like, look for spelling and grammatical errors. And I'm like, if that's the way you get caught, that's just lazy on the part of the scammers, yes. Right? Like, it's like, how hard is it to spell, Home Depot right? Like when you get these things, you know what I mean? Or like whatever you're scamming and telling people they've won something or whatever. How do you spell that wrong? It seems so stupid to me.
Because there's a psychological thing our brains do, is that we correct those. As we like process it in our heads, we correct that. So in our it may look totally wrong, but then we end up like correcting it as we look at it, and then we just plow forward and say, oh, cool, I got this gift card, or the guy from Nigeria has chosen me for that $1 million ATM card. Woo, yay!
Right, but however, when the guy from Nigeria spells Nigeria wrong,
then there's an issue.
So obviously looking at stuff, what are some tips on what to look for? What are 2 or 3 things that are the most common tip-offs that something is, again, fugazi?
Always look at the from, because there's lots of times that the name will be like, John Smith, but then you look at the from email and it's just some random email. That's already, red flag number 1 right there. 2, like you said, is like spelling and grammatical inconsistencies, because they're getting real good at trying to make those emails look like they say they're coming from Microsoft, they're coming from Google, they're coming from like, a financial system, a bank. Like, look for any little weird inconsistencies in that email, because the bank's not going to email you for account information. Microsoft and Google aren't going to email you to say that like your password's expiring or you have to do something with your account and we need you to log in. They're not going to do that. It doesn't happen. Like that's not, because email is inherently insecure. So any of those things are instant scams. Even like, when you get the random emails from people, and you're like, what is this? I don't understand what this is. Everything has to be taken with skepticism now. Like, everything has to be skeptical. You have to be skeptical.
Except for what you're telling them, and they shouldn't be skeptical.
Yeah.
I bought a pair of gym shoes last week at Fleet Feet, and they have a phenomenal process by which they measure your feet, and I could go on and on about it, but I got a coupon for them for like 10% off. And so I forwarded it to my sisters, my mom, a couple of people, and I said, I had a great experience. Here's a coupon. And every single one of them was like, you got hacked. No, I actually sent you a coupon.
Yeah.
This is really me.
Yeah.
And I tried to put it in my own language and stuff, and they're like, "No, you got hacked." I'm like, "No, that's actually me."
That's
Yep.
good. So you should be paranoid.
So people are alert. Yeah.
Yes.
You have to be alert. And paranoid's good too, because like as somebody who's in this field, like I'm paranoid, but you just have to be alert.
Right. Well, and luckily a lot of the stuff goes to junk, right? So from an email perspective, like when I check out my junk file, a lot of it is the stuff that you're talking about. And, it's pretty obvious, but there's some of them do make it through. So aside from being alert on, that was chiefly email, what about technologically, from a technology standpoint, messaging like texts and things like that, and browsing and just being on the internet in general?
So like I guess browsing in general is, well, there's actually there's a bigger one here too. Let's go to, so my number two is this whole thing with passwords. So passwords are horrible, right? Yes, we have them, and yes, we have to use them and whatever, but they're a horrible thing because we end up kind of reusing the same password for a lot of things, or we do one little variation of it, or you're using stuff that can be very easily guessed. You need to have strong passwords for everything. And a lot of vendors are requiring it now. But you have to have a strong password for everything. And that's essentially, greater than 8 characters, a symbol in it, a number, a capital letter, and something that's nothing like sequential, like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 8, 8, 8, 8, or, stuff like that. And in combination with the strong password, you need to have 2-factor authentication set up on everything. I cannot stress that enough. There are so many ways. You can use Google Authenticator, you can use Microsoft Authenticator, you can do the text message option, but you need to have 2-factor authentication turned on, because it's not the question of like, if your account's going to be compromised, it's going to be when it's going to be compromised of anything. You read about the data breaches all the time. And like a bunch of account information got leaked and all that. That 2-factor authentication. Now, don't lose your phone. That's the other part of it, is don't lose your phone, because that's your last stand, is turning on 2-factor authentication for everything. You have to do that. Like it's not an option anymore. Like you have to do it.
No, that I totally get it. Well, and what's nice is, from the password perspective, at least on some things, you can tie it to your biometric stuff, because I think you're right. It's a pain, right? So people have to they always try and figure out a way around making something complex simple to manage it, when it should be complex to prevent the scam from happening.
Right.
But I can tell you, some of the stuff you can tell is like totally designed by people who are completely focused on like the security, right? So one place I worked, I remember you had to create a password, and it had so many requirements that it was like, oh my God, I'm never going to remember this. What am I going to do? I'm going to freaking write it down, right? So all of a sudden they made it so complex to do it that you ended up going back all the way to like not what you're supposed to, because people made certain passwords to not write it down, and that was so complex you end up back in the middle.
Right. And then you're back to like, oh, where's my Post-it that has my password on it? Or where's my little notebook I carry in? I think
that one right here.
where's my notebook I carry in my purse, or my little folded piece of paper in my wallet? Where is that? And then we've gone right back to
question though.
Whole bag.
What do you recommend for storage of passwords? And I'm going to ask in a really roundabout. Well, I'm asking kind of from a tangential side, right? Because if I had $1 for every time my kids said, "What's my password? What's my Apple ID? What's my," I'm like, how do I freaking know? It's yours. But also, again, living with an elderly parent, he forgets his password probably daily for getting onto something. So if I didn't have that, then it's like, okay, what can I do? So where can people store them?
So, you can do the one thing that, I'm not a fan of, but people do it all the time, the trusty Excel spreadsheet with all the passwords. But then of course, what do you do with that Excel spreadsheet? Where does it go? Does it just sit on the desktop? Is it sitting on like, USB drive? That's the one problem with doing that. So one of the things that you can do, and you get it for free, you set up a Microsoft account, and in OneDrive for personal, or personal OneDrive, there's an extra level of security called the personal vault. And that, it's like 20-minute access. It has extra security put onto it. You can save everything in that little vault, and it actually looks like a little safe. The icon is a little safe. You can at least save it in there, so at least it gets, it's getting backed up by Microsoft. It's sitting there secured, and then it's also limited access to people too. So like yourself, or if you share somebody and share it for somebody to access, you can. But there's other ways that you could do it. You could use a OneNote notebook. There are all those password managers. The risk in those is if the company goes away, and there's like, if that information were to happen to get like locked out. There's online ones that are out there. I don't recommend them. And so you have options to do it, but it's all in how you like save that data, because you don't want that data to get accessed by somebody else.
That was my question, was the aggregators. Like I use LastPass. Mm-hmm. So what are the pros and cons there?
Wait, we're gonna go to commercial real quick. Come back. We'll talk about that and the last 3 steps and the biggest mistake. Got a lot to get in the second half of the show.
Sounds good.
When parents get divorced and become...
All right, we are back. And for those just joining us, this is GettingStarted.Life on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. Our guest today is Joseph Markovich, IT professional, owner of JCMA Incorporated, and I didn't say this earlier, Microsoft Silver Partner, which has got to be awesome. And today's show is brought to you by Keystone Mediation and Red Leg Funding. So we when we ended the first half of the show, there was a question of some of the online aggregator things for passwords. I want to cover that briefly, but we got to cover the last 3 steps. So what about those? You said that you don't like them.
I'm not a fan of that, because they may say that like, we don't have access, it's all encrypted, blah, 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 blah. But I don't see the need for paying for a service when you can get something for free. So, and the free that I talk about is your Microsoft account with the personal vault on OneDrive. That's what I use personally. And I've never had a need for any of these services, any other software. What I have is a OneNote notebook is what I use. And then that is locked away in that personal vault. And that's what I use. And I've never needed another service for any of that.
Well, and it seems to me, before we move on, the other part of it is it's sort of like having an alarm on your house, right? Like it's one of those things where if you're taking some basic measures, it's easier to find someone who hasn't. So, as long as you're kind of covering the steps of encrypted and limited access, then realistically, there's an easier target. If they're making these base hits like you're talking about, not making huge amount, it's not worth it for them to try and figure out how to break your vault, because there's just not enough reason to do it.
No, and everyone in our world now, we've decided that there's an app or a service for everything, because that's just companies trying to monetize that. And so there's an app and a service for every little thing that you could say, like for security, for protection, for privacy, whatever. And a lot of it is just, again, we're going back to the first one, being aware and just watching what you're doing, strong passwords, and two-factor authentication. Just those three things right there are like the biggest tips I can give.
So let's move on to step 3. And what I like about talking about a subject like this are the steps are very concrete. So I know we're going to get them in. Step 3, they've already gotten aware. They're making sure that they're looking out for threats. They're protecting themselves with 2-step authentication and a password. Now what do they do?
So other things about, like, we have all these ways to get information electronically, bank statements, credit card statements, medical bills, insurance, like forms, all this stuff. The more you can have sent electronically, the better. No dig on the Postal Service, because I love the Postal Service, but you don't know who's going to be, you don't know, like, your mail's in your mailbox on the street or on the side of your house, who's gone through that. You would never know if somebody took a letter out of the mailbox, say, oh, this looks interesting, what could I use with this? You just don't know anymore. So the more that you can have of, like, official stuff done electronically, because they're spending all the money to protect it, encrypt it, make it accessible for a whole bunch of years. You don't need to have all that paper in a file cabinet, which is just, that's not secure. But you're going to shove it in a file drawer and then leave it there forever, and God forbid the house gets broken into, or the apartment gets broken into. Anything you can move to electronic, do it.
So it's interesting, because you're kind of saying to be safe online, move more stuff online. Is the reason you're protecting that because, some of the things where I know, like, if they can get a lot of information on you, it's easier to hack your stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's contrary to what I would have thought. Like, I think people look and they're like, hey, you put it in a safe, what's going to happen? But you're saying it's how it gets there.
Right.
Got it.
So there, you should, like, for me, like, paper statements of anything, no way. It all stays, because then at least, as long as that padlock is on your web browser, and Chrome or Edge or Firefox aren't griping and yelling at you saying, hey, this isn't secure, are you sure you want to do this? As long as that padlock is there, like, that is secure, because that's the security that we have. So we also have to, like, accept that is going to be secure. And if the bank decides to, if the bank or the credit union or whatever, if they're the victims of a breach, that's all on them. It's their responsibility to have to, like, deal with that. But so then I have a bombshell 5th tip at the end, but I'm slowly leading to it. But
all right.
But anything that you can keep electronic, do it.
Okay. So, go ahead. Sorry, Marya.
I just said, okay, yep, got it.
So now, number 4, now that they've gotten rid of a lot of the paperwork and things like that, what's next?
So there's also other, you have to have protection on your computer and your devices for, viruses, ransomware, malicious software. You have to have that protection, and everybody knows that. You have to do it, whether it's PC, Mac, whatever. But the other things that they're trying to now package and pitch to you about, like, privacy protection and identity theft protection, that's a great buzzword that they use like mad. Like, that is all reactive. Nothing is proactive. So that only works when something goes south. And I am a huge person against all that stuff. And I watch the commercials all the time on TV, and I get mad and I start yelling at the TV and everything else. But those are, if you are already following step 1, 2, and 3, you're not going to need step 4, which is like, oh, I have to protect my identity. Like, no, you just need some common sense to like not do bad stuff. That's
So
going to
then,
get you. Yeah.
oh, go ahead. So
Those are not.
that's not step 4 though, right? So what are you saying is step 4?
Well, step 4 is like keeping the computer safe with,
Oh, got it.
virus protection,
Okay, I get what
anti-spyware,
you meant now. Okay.
anti-malware, ransomware protection. But what the companies are putting this into a package of like, oh, you get this like, identity theft protection.
Oh,
You
got
get
it.
this
Okay.
like private VPN. Well, you don't know where any of that data is getting routed to on the private VPN, So like these are unnecessary things. And the identity protection is essentially a farce because you're only going to be protected as much as you want to pay. But once
Right.
again, the problem's already happened.
So you're saying by making sure that you have all the malware protection and all that you shouldn't have any issues.
No, but what's happened is because that's become so vanilla now, like you have to have virus protection, you have to have malware protection, but they're packaging in these other subscription services that are just completely unnecessary anymore in the world. Like you don't need them. You just have to just be safe.
Going back to what you had said earlier, how there's an app or a program for everything, I feel though that some of us less technologically sophisticated, I don't think I'm technologically dumb, I think I'm kind of mainstream, but I would venture to say I probably have too many of those programs between malware and cleaners and protections because it doesn't seem streamlined to the average person.
It's already loaded on a lot of
I'm
stuff.
overprotected maybe? Is there a specific one that you recommend or a specific way to research it that you recommend?
The only companies that I recommend for any type of this protection are a company called Trend Micro, a company called Sophos, which I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, Sophos, and the third one is Microsoft, because these are basically all inclusive.
And a lot of times it comes with it, right?
And yeah, lots of times, like, computers are going to come with it. They're going to come with like the McAfee, some kind of McAfee limited subscription, or they're going to come with.
So I think a big part of step 4, though, then is knowing what you already got.
Knowing what you got, knowing what you have, but then also knowing that you may have 10 things installed on the computer and it's not enough. It's like it's not doing everything, and we're getting lulled into a false sense of security.
So now this is totally it's a little bit away from sort of these steps. But so again, as a parent, like I've got, we've got a 3-generation household. So I'm making sure everybody doesn't have crap on their computers or has the right crap on there to protect them. What do you recommend? Is there anything out there to make it easier? Because I've got Apple, Android, and Apple and Microsoft. I've got everything. How do you manage that?
You don't. From the personal level, you don't. There's nothing good out there to manage. On the business side, that's a different story. But on the personal side, with all our devices and all our apps and all our phones and tablets and computers and laptops and everything else, you don't. So what you have to do is you essentially have to stick with, one brand or two brands, and you have to stick with it, because the software, like all these apps too, have put us into a false sense of security. Like, oh, it's taking care of it for us, so everything's fine. Oh, it's doing everything for us under the hood, so everything's fine. And it's not, it's not fine. You may think that everything is getting scanned and protected. It's like, oh, it's going to tell me if I do something wrong, or if I stumble into the weeds with all the thorns, like the thorny bushes everywhere.
Right.
And sometimes it's not, and it's a false sense of security sometimes.
Do you ever oh, did I catch you?
I would say that's my assumption. I have like 4 or 5 things on my computer that I think are protecting me, and I'm assuming they're doing a decent job. And if it yells at me, then I'll know there's a bad thing happening.
Like what's coming to my mind, and I just thought of this, is like a lot of times in a household, you have a computer that has become somewhat obsolete, but you could almost clear that off of everything and then reinstall just like any financial stuff and make that just like used for that. And then basically there's no other computer that's getting access to it. So you're kind of connected there, like no email on there or anything. Just that's the one that you connect with all of your important accounts. And then everything else, obviously you got your phone, but maybe that's a way to like manage all the crap when you've got so many different people accessing it.
Well, and a lot of people will just, everybody wants the convenience.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like, I'm going to open the app. I'm going to look at my bank account. I'm going to look at my investments. I'm going to look at they want like the thing that's going to be the most convenient for them.
Right.
And so in doing that, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's just that you just have to just be mindful. See, we're back to step one again about just being aware. We're right back to being aware again. You just have to be mindful.
I'm still groaning from step 2. The two-factor authentication still makes me like, oh my gosh, it's so much extra work.
You had that.
All right. So now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is it the bombshell one?
It dropped the bomb, baby.
Step 5, stop using your debit card. Stop. Do not use it anymore.
Online, you mean, or just like
anywhere?
Okay.
Ooh.
The reason is, so people are going to fight me on this, and I don't care, because I have not used a debit card since I was in college, and that was a million years ago, it feels like. Yes, the bank protects you. The bank will protect you. But because of how debit cards work, your money's already gone after you realize there's fraud or something fishy. Don't use your debit card, because you could get cleaned out first. And then what are you going to do? You always use that credit card for everything, because it's the bank's money that you're using up front, not your own money. Don't use your debit card.
From my years of working in banking, I second that bombshell.
Do not use it for anything. Use it at the ATM. That's it, because that's physically controlled. But anything else, never. And if you don't have a credit card, then you need to get one, because you need to use the bank's money first.
No, that's
if
great
anything
advice.
happens.
That's or I guess you could have like a debit card for a small account, and another bank have all your big accounts.
Yeah, but just
a lot of the credit cards will issue you a fake number to use online.
Yep.
Some of the debit cards will also issue you a fake number to use online. So if that is compromised, they can just close that number and your account stays the same. So
yeah, I mean, sometimes it's nice to use it at the store. You get cash back, like not the online store, and it's cheaper than all the ATMs. But no, that totally makes sense. Before we go to the biggest mistake, though, I was hoping you would talk a little bit about Wi-Fi. Because the other thing is everything now is Wi-Fi.
Yep.
And everybody's like, oh, free Wi-Fi. All right, man. So how can you protect yourself that way? I'll throw in a step 6.
Okay. So you should avoid public and free Wi-Fi like the plague. You should. But when you have to use it, and if you have to use it, then as long as that padlock is when you're on the internet, on your web browser, as long as you're doing stuff that's all HTTPS and secured and the padlock's on, you're safe. You are. Public Wi-Fi still is horrible. If you need to have Wi-Fi all the time, Wi-Fi is everywhere, right? And it ranges from a range of like, it's really crappy to like really amazing, right? If you need to really have to have like some type of Wi-Fi hotspot, then get it from your cell phone company. They're cheap. And use the hotspot for lots of things. But as long as it's secured that you're web browsing, you're safe, because that's like industry standard encryption.
Now, people, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It goes back to number 1 too, though, right? Like, so if you're in Starbucks on their Wi-Fi on your computer, maybe that's not the time to like check your bank account and transfer money to your brokerage account. Like, don't do that stuff.
Don't do those kind of things in public Wi-Fi. Even the dumb
do it on
things
your phone,
right? Or even the dumb things of like, I'm going to sit there on public Wi-Fi, and I'm going to scroll through and start putting all the pictures of my kids on Facebook and stuff. Like, that's not the place for public Wi-Fi. The public Wi-Fi is to do something like quick, or you're gonna do something that is nothing is gonna get like compromised or taken, or like you're doing like just like vanilla stuff, like, oh, I'm writing my next book, or I'm going on like, I just don't do like the things that you're doing that are like sensitive and private to you or your family or your group or your tribe or whatever. Don't do that stuff on public Wi-Fi. Don't do it if you can avoid it, because that's not the place for it. that's not the place to do stuff like that. It's
No,
just not.
there's no chance that people can intercept. Like right now, like if someone is close to my house and they could get on my network by somehow cracking that password, if any computers are networked, they can get in that way, right?
Well, that all depends on, like, if you have a stupidly simple Wi-Fi password, the most that they're gonna, the most that someone's gonna do is honestly not much. They're gonna be essentially trying to do others. They may try to, like, that is something that's low hanging fruit. That, like, it's like, is this really worth it to do that? To park in front of your house and try and say, let's see what Doug is doing right now. But with how security is in the world now, especially with like stuff with like financial and email that you're accessing over the web, as long as it's secured, like that is secured. It is. Otherwise, then you would compromise the entire like public trust of like, oh, so if the bank isn't secure at, you know, the Comcast hotspot that's in my neighborhood, then what makes it secure at home? So, you know, public Wi-Fi, yeah, it's one of those like necessary evils because still in the year 2022, we still have crappy cell phone reception. So we have to use public Wi-Fi.
Right.
And then,
right.
so again, now we've just gone back to one again, just be aware.
So real quick, if people want, and again, this will be video as well as audio. So if people want more information or if they have questions,
Did
what's
we do
the
the
best
biggest
way to get a hold of
mistake?
you? What's that?
Did we
Oh,
do,
the biggest mistake. You're right.
we talked about a lot of mistakes, but what's the biggest?
I know we were kind of talking about mistakes, so it threw me off. So biggest mistake.
Biggest mistake.
Not doing 1 through 5.
Well, not doing 1 through 5, or actually 1 through 6, but I would say that because there's so many threats in the world, there's so many people that want to get your stuff. The biggest mistake that I would say is attempting to try and do it all on your own, because for the normal person, it's just not possible. There is so many things to think about, and this is something that we do for our clients, is like, you know, we'll go through and do like a checkup and everything. There are so many things that the normal non-IT person would never think of about what to do, what not to do. So essentially it's just trying to do it yourself. I say that's the biggest mistake, because there are lots of people out there that know a lot of things in our field, in the IT field, that, you know, a couple, like an hour of time could save you like days and weeks of just an absolute nightmare.
Well, and something interesting you said, which I wanted to touch on, is you were talking about like pictures on Facebook and stuff like that. And, you know, I know a guy who works for Facebook. He was telling me you don't put a lot of stuff on there because it's giving information that ultimately allows somebody else to
That is correct.
reverse engineer. So
Yes.
what's interesting is when people are like, you know, I've got the best virus scan and my passwords are great and all that, and it's like, hey, here's my life, and by the way, we're vacationing next week, so if you want to break into my house too, why don't you do that? Where they're giving away like everything, or the quizzes. It's like,
Yes.
so
All
can you answer
bad.
these 5 questions? What's your mother's
Yes.
maiden name? What kind of
Yes.
car did you drive?
And once again, Doug, you've gone back to number 1 again,
Right.
of just being aware, because yes, all that is used for malicious intent. When you're
and it's like,
yeah,
and it's not thinking like a criminal, right? It's not thinking like, oh boy, what can I find here in all this information that gives me a window to, one, whether the person's worth robbing, too.
right.
You know, so you know, unless you're so. Thank you for mentioning the first mistake, or the biggest mistake, Marya. I would have hated to miss that, but we're actually running out of time. So first, actually talk a little bit about your company and what you do on the kind of bigger scale, what services you provide businesses, and then you can let everyone know how to get hold of you.
So we do everything IT, from like computers and servers. We sell the Microsoft platform, the most like secure and agile platform that's out there. We do everything with CRM, process improvement, app development, we take this whole, like, this is overused phrase, digital transformation. It's the worst buzzword phrase in the world now. But taking a look at like this giant view of your company and how can security, processes, and productivity be improved. And we use the Microsoft tools to help with that.
And a lot of the stuff that you were talking about today, you bring to the corporate level.
Yes.
The B2B level. And if people wanted to get hold of you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
So two best ways. One is just drop us an email. It's hello@jcmainc.com, or just give a phone call. I love to talk, as you saw in the show today. So phone number is 219-728-4188.
And of course, I'm assuming they can find you on Facebook and all the other, you guys got some witty posts, I see. So
Yes.
Facebook and
LinkedIn. Oh yeah, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. You'll see us all there too, with all our fun posts.
And we will also have your information. We have it down there in the bottom, and you'll be able to find it on all of the social media as well. So, Joe, I really want to thank you for stepping in today and talking about internet security. I think it's one of those things where I think when people talk about it, they're like, oh, yeah, that's really obvious, and they don't do it. So even if these are familiar steps to people, to hear them again means that hopefully people will listen and avoid some pretty bad outcomes, when stuff that you read about, we didn't even talk about it, but where they basically lock down your hard drive and make you pay ransomware.
Yep. That's and everything that happens is essentially avoidable through, just training and just, those little jabs of like, hey, just be a little aware and vigilant. Oh, we're back to aware again. And just, all of this is avoidable.
Well, thank you once again for coming out. Really, really appreciate it. For anyone listening, you've been listening to Getting Started.Life on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We're a show about starting new things. And we, again, as you heard, we talk about the 5 steps to starting and the biggest mistake. But if we haven't covered something, if there's something that you want to know about and get started, let us know. You can go to our website, www.GettingStarted.Life. That's the actual URL. And you can reach us there. And if there's something you want to talk about, if there's something that you want to teach people about starting, reach us at the same place. We can see if it makes sense to do a show on it. We record every other Tuesday, so we'll see you a week from next Tuesday. And thanks for listening.
Good show.